Okay, so I just want to say welcome to you all. My name is Andrea Sturzik, and I'm the director of the Center for Educational Research, Collaboration and Development in the Faculty of Education. We used to be known as CIDRU, so that's why you may not have heard of us as CERCD, but it's the faculty's research center, and I'm the director. And Amanda is here with us as well, and Amanda is the center's research assistant. So we are happy to host today's Lunch and Learn, and now I'm going to turn it over to Paul.
All right. Thanks very much, Andrea. My name is Paul Diederich. I'm the Associate Director of Communications in University Advancement and Communications here at the University of Regina. I'm going to get us started. I just want to kind of set the stage for a few minutes about who we are and what we do and how we can help researchers tell their stories. And then I'll turn it over to Krista and Samantha for the main event today. This is the first of 3 mini workshops on research communications at the U of R. Today, we're talking about options for getting your research story told, the various vehicles and platforms we can utilize, and how to best work with our communications team to utilize those platforms. Next week, and I hope you signed up for it, we're going to be presenting specifically on how to best engage with traditional media. And down the road, we're going to have a session with Conversation Canada representatives to talk about their platform as well and the services that they provide. Now, I promise I'll keep the slideshow brief. There's only 4 slides, so let me pull it up here. There, can everybody see that? Great. So, big question is, why is it important to share our research stories and get them out into the public sphere? I'm guessing that, I need to move that. There you go. You wouldn't be here today if you didn't think it was important to be telling your stories. But what specifically are the outcomes that we're seeking? Here's some of the things that we're trying to accomplish by telling your research stories and telling the stories of our researchers. Elevate the profile and reputation of our research enterprise. Attract the attention of funding agencies, prospective partners, potential donors, recruit other top-notch researchers to come and be part of our faculty here at the U of R, bring understanding of our research and its value to a wider general audience, recruit and retain students, both undergrad and graduate students, ultimately enhancing our overall institutional reputation. And how do we do it? So, our small but mighty research communications team at UAC, I'll introduce those folks shortly. We have a number of tools at our disposal to help you tell your research story. I'm not going to read this list out. You guys can read. You're also likely familiar with most of these platforms anyway. But I do want to emphasize that while this kind of looks like a menu, we don't really want it to be a menu for ordering off of. So I prefer to think of us instead of like waiters who are going, what would you like, ma'am? Or what would you like, sir? We're more like caterers who are going to sit down with you and talk about who your audience is, what their tastes are, what we're looking to accomplish, what the reason for the event is. Certain tools work better for certain projects and certain audiences. We'll work with you to determine which levers that we want to pull. You guys have expertise in your fields, obviously. We also have expertise in delivering effective communications to external, non-peer audiences. We want to work together to develop the most effective comms strategies and approaches we can, and we do that through conversation and consultation with you, the researchers. Speaking of you, the researchers, we need some things from you to do the job properly. We really need you to get us involved early. The sooner we know something is coming down the pipe, the better position we are to support it. We need you to tell us what your project is about and what outcomes you're hoping to achieve. Be prepared to simplify your language as required and your concepts so that a more general audience can understand them. Be open to our input and our ideas. Like I said, we know our stuff. for the most part. Consider what visual elements or opportunities might enhance the storytelling. Video, photographs, images, podcasts. There's all kinds of ways to tell stories in our new multimedia universe. Be available to media within reason, of course. It doesn't mean you have to jump every time media calls, but if you're looking for media attention, you should make yourself available. That, of course, we'll be speaking to more specifically next week as we talk about media engagement. And as promised, my very last slide. This is us. Our handy dandy little research communications team. Krista Baliko, many of you will know already, is our one and only research comms strategist that's dedicated to research communications. Everett is joining us today, but he'll be presenting next week when it comes to media. He's primarily our public relations strategist for all media engagement at the university, not just research, but he does support research efforts as well. That's me, as I've already introduced myself, and our director, Aaron Limaker, also gets involved in telling research stories, or at least guiding strategy and decision-making in concert and consultation with the VPR's office. So that's it for me. I told you I'd get through it quickly. I'm going to be around when it comes to the Q&A if you have any questions specifically from my end of things. But right now, I really want to introduce you to Krista Baliko, our #1 research communication strategist, because she's our only research communication strategist. And she has a special guest today in Samantha Lawler. And I'm going to turn it over to those two.
Okay, thanks, Paul. What a way to make me feel very special. I like to think of myself as the sommelier of the group, the fancy sommelier. So I'm the research communications strategist. I edit Discourse, the University of Regina's research magazine. I am the contact for the Conversation Canada, which, as Paul said, we'll have a special session on, but we'll touch on that today as well. And also many other ways of helping you get your research out there and supporting in other ways, which Sam and I can also talk about. So today I'm going to have a chat with Dr. Samantha Lawler. And then after that, you'll have an opportunity to ask questions of Sam, me, Paul, and Everett. Things that have popped up just based on the conversation, general questions you have. And we are really happy to chat with you either in this forum, and afterwards you can feel free to contact those of us in the UAC team, one-on-one, email, happy to meet with you about questions you may have as well. So today I'm pleased to be joined by U of R astronomer, Dr. Samantha Lawler, who's an assistant professor at Campion College. Sam's emerged as a really important voice for astronomers and stargazers alike as satellites are threatening to steal our views of the night sky. She has hundreds of thousands of readers through her Conversation Canada articles. She's a regular guest on CBC's Morning Edition. CJME, she's been on. She's appeared on As It Happens, which is a dream. I'm so nerdy. It's a dream. The National, CBC's National, and dozens of other local, national, and international media. Sometimes Sam's work is picked up in languages I don't understand, and I only recognize Sam's name, and that's the only reason I know that it's about her work. So I'm really excited Sam's been able to take the time to join us today for a chat. To talk with us about how to share your research, specifically with non-experts. So thanks for joining us, Sam.
Thanks for organizing.
Really quick story, because I just want to let people know how I met you. It's been a few years now, but one day I was sitting at my computer and an events, the events listserv popped up in email, and it was a really clever title. And while I know no researchers in this group, so all 33 researchers who are with us today I know you have really exciting titles, but other researchers who aren't in this specific meeting sometimes have really boring titles. So when a really interesting title snapped across my desk, I thought I need to reach out to this researcher. I don't know the name. She must be new. And the title was Planet 9, N-I-N-E, or Planet 9, N-E-I-N. And I thought, that's clever. I don't know what it means. I know nothing about it. So I reached out to Sam and I was like, you seem funny. Let's have a chat. And that's kind of how our relationship started. And Sam's then written for the conversation, discourse, all kinds of things. So Sam, I want to just chat with you now about how you kind of got to where you are today with hundreds of thousands of reads and these regular guest appearances.
So I guess if probably mostly started with, I like talking to kids. I think that's a really good place to start, right? Kids ask the best questions. I'm fortunate that I'm in an area of science that's really easy to explain to kids and to anyone, really. Everyone's excited about astronomy. Kids love asking questions about black holes, like, right, it's easy. So I spent a lot of time going and visiting classrooms, and I think that's a good training, in the before times. I guess I do it now on Zoom sometimes, but like it's good training just to figure out how to explain these complicated topics in a way that a kid can understand. And I think that's fantastic training for talking about science with the general public. So that's kind of how I got started in this direction.
So what kind of an impact has telling your research story had on your research?
So by talking to people, it definitely helps me to ground it a bit. I mean, like literally, my research is literally not on this planet, right? So having some connections, right? Figuring out how does a kid relate to what I'm talking about, other than, it's interesting, right? How does that affect, their life? So I think that sort of that direction, right? That way of thinking really helps with science communication. How does it relate to this, whoever I'm talking to right now? How do they relate to the outer solar system or something, right? Like what's something they can connect to in that story?
Right. And your research really does have this sort of impact that people can see, which is that satellites are beginning to take over the night sky. So have you noticed that from having your research out there, that there actually has been any kind of impact on what you're writing about?
Oh, for sure. I mean, well, yeah. So what I'm, so this particular, so let me step back a little bit. So my area of research is really the outer solar system, right? But I started noticing in my research images more and more satellites. I live on a farm, for the first time ever, I live in a place where I can step out my back door and see the Milky Way. So I noticed more satellites with my eyes, right? And so I got more and more interested in, oh my gosh, what's actually going to happen with this? And so there are many astronomers around the world who are very concerned about this same problem, right? So I sort of took it to another level to try to model, like, what is the night sky actually going to look like with all of these satellites that are planned by companies like SpaceX and others. And so that has really, the only way that astronomers can fight that particular environmental degradation is to tell lots of people what's happening and get consumer power, right? So my science communication recently has taken on a new sort of urgent quality to it, right? It's like, I really need to tell people what is happening. I need to explain what I did in my models, in my science research, in a way that they can understand, so they can tell their friends not to buy satellite internet, or not to or to tell the satellite company that they buy internet from that they want them to make their satellites darker, right? So so that's so for sure, like, my research is absolutely now like really powerfully tied to science communication. I'm not sure if that answered your original question or not. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, totally, 100%. I mean, it's interesting to look at something and say, okay, I need this work to get out there, which is why everyone's here today. I you know, everyone's research, it's important. I need this to get out here. In order for me to get it out there, I need people to understand so that they can, well, in your case, act. You know, there's an action that's attached to yours, and not everyone's research has an action attached to it, but certainly understanding it is the first step. Because if you're talking about this stuff and no one knows what you're talking about, it goes nowhere. So let's talk a little bit about getting your work out there. We understand why it's important. Can you just talk about maybe what impact having the Conversation Canada, so the platform the Conversation Canada has had on your work, and what that has led to?
Yeah, that has been immensely helpful. So yeah, so like Krista mentioned at the beginning, right? So she reached out to me and suggested, hey, maybe you should think about writing something for the Conversation Canada, which I had never heard of, right? I had no idea what it was. And so Krista helped me to put together a pitch, which I had no idea how any of this worked, right? So you put together a pitch that, you know, makes your article sound interesting. So you just write like 3 or 4 sentences, maybe not even that much. Krista helped me to craft that in a way that an editor would read it and say, yes, that sounds really interesting. I bet a lot of people would want that, right? So that's a very particular type of science communication that Krista is excellent at. So then I wrote an article about, well, initially about the outer solar system research. And there is a science editor who goes through and you know, helps to fix your article into, you know, helps with the language, helps like, oh, that concept, that's a little too, can you explain that better, right? It's been a fantastic process. And then reporters read it and they contact you. Like it's been incredible how much engagement I've gotten with each of the articles that I've written. So I've had articles about Planet 9 and the outer solar system, and I've had articles about mega constellations of satellites, and huge engagement. Like every single article that I have posted, I've had multiple reporters email me afterwards. I'm still getting, my most recent one went up in November. I'm still getting emails from reporters about that one from 3 months ago. So it's like, this is where reporters are looking to find stories to write about in science. It's fantastic.
Yeah, and every one of your articles has had a ton of your readership. They also go to reporters, and so those people are contacting you. And I think beyond that, you are also getting some regular spots. So you're regularly now on CBC's Morning Edition. And how has that been about getting your research out? You and I've never even talked about sort of how the Morning Edition came about and how you got a regular spot. Do you want to just like touch on that briefly?
Yeah, how did that actually start? I think it was, I think they, one of the producers reached out to me because I think it was because of one of the Conversation articles. And then that same producer suggested, hey, do you want to come on sort of regularly and talk about things that are happening in the sky? I mean, like, I've kind of got the market cornered there because I'm the only tenure track research astronomer in the province, right? So that's kind of a natural one there, but that's been fantastic, right? And so, you know, so now I have a relationship with that particular show where I just every month or two, if I notice something like, oh, there's this, a lunar eclipse happening, I'll send an email and say, hey, can I, come talk about this? And they say, yes, come talk. We'll call you at stupid early in the morning, and you can try to talk about science on the radio. It's actually really cool. But I really appreciate it. But and that has led to other ones also, right? Like they've said, oh, hey, can you also do the one in Saskatoon, or can you do the afternoon edition today? And so just like having a couple of contacts like that really leads to a lot more. And a lot of, CBC is all the little subunits are very interconnected, right? So that's led to a lot of other, national parts of CBC contacting me for things too. So yeah, it's like once you get a certain number of reporters, it's like it just sort of snowballs. It's kind of neat. It's been neat to watch that happen.
And before you and I met, you had not done these kinds of interviews. Is that right?
No, I had done like a couple. I got interviewed once for something I did as a postdoc, which I don't know. I still have pretty bad imposter syndrome, but at that time, like it was so bad that like I assumed it was a scam and I didn't respond right away, and it was this big deal. So I was not good at it at all. And now I feel like I've gotten pretty good at it just by having to do it so many times. It has gotten easier.
So talk to me a bit about that. So obviously you were a bit intimidated at first. So what kind of specific skills would you say that you've developed to be telling your research story in a way that works for radio, which is different than print, right? Like when you're talking on the radio, people have a less time to take in what you're saying. So you actually have to even be, I don't know, plainer language. So what specific skills have you developed and that you think would be helpful for others to know about?
Yeah, I think one thing is that repetition really does work in this case. It's like, I've been interviewed about mega constellations of satellites so many times now that I can just answer the questions hardly without thinking. It's like I just go into this routine that I've developed, right? And so I guess you also have to be careful not to just, because we're all, as scientists, we're so used to giving talks to other scientists in our subfield, right? So you have to be careful not to fall into that jargon for your field, right? There's definitely like a different kind of presentation. I think also teaching Astronomy 101 here, which is my, like I will teach that every semester until I retire, right? Like that's my main class here. So that has also helped a lot, right? Teaching these concepts it's for non-science majors, right? So I have to explain everything in the universe in one semester to non-science majors, right? So that has really helped. There's a couple of little tricks like that I've learned now, like, okay, if I have, I know I have this interview coming up, I'm going to pick like 2 or 3 things that I want to be sure to say, no matter what they ask me, whether or not they ask me a question that leads to that particular thing. So I might like write those down for myself and have them, on a piece of paper in front of me while I'm talking on the interview, just to make sure that I get those points in. I guess, just not getting flustered, right? Like they might ask you, like I've gotten asked some really weird questions out of left field, and it's like it's a lot of that is like answering student questions, right? Like everybody says like there's no such thing as a stupid question. There are some pretty stupid questions, right? But you don't want to like laugh in the student's face, because that's not encouraging, right? You want to encourage everyone to keep asking these questions, right? So like, even if they ask you a really stupid question, like you have to just roll with it, not laugh, and think of a way to sort of reframe it into something that you want to talk about, right? So those are skills that I've definitely gotten better at. And also just knowing that it does get easier. Like I did not believe that it would ever get easier. And I still get nervous before these interviews, but not really, really nervous. And once I'm in it, it's like, okay, I'm just doing this routine that I've done a bunch of times. But I didn't think that would actually get easier, but it does.
Yeah, it does get, being nervous is okay, being a little nervous, but yeah, it gets easier. And, you know, I've been listening to you and reading your stuff, and I've seen it, you know, over the last couple of years really sort of change, and you're really just more comfortable with it. And it does take practice. And so people who are listening and thinking, oh, I don't know if I could ever do that, you know, you can. And that's one of the things our team is here to help you with, is the helping with pitches and helping with that. So it's not even that you have to go it alone, and it does get better. I want to just highlight a couple of things you said too, Sam, which is that having 2 or 3 points is great for a media interview. It's also great when we're talking about writing and just getting your information out there. You know, often researchers, you've got journal articles that have a ton of information in them. And I often am chit-chatting with researchers saying, you know, each of your headings could be its own thing, you know, each of your subheadings could be its own thing. And so just really thinking about taking a beat and knowing that your goal isn't to get everything that you know from your brain into other people's brains, but that there can be a process. So Sam's written a ton of different articles, which has meant that different parts of her research is getting sort of released or revealed at different times. So it is, you know, 2 or 3 points. And yeah, sorry, Sam, did you want to add something?
Can I add to that? Yeah, so a perfect example of that. So I got invited a couple of weeks ago to write an op-ed for the LA Times, which is amazing.
Yeah, no big deal, Sam. No big deal.
It's pretty cool. But so for that, so I spent a lot of time like writing this really great article with like every single bad thing about mega constellations. And the editor came back and said, no, just one thing, just do astronomy. Like just talk about the bad parts of mega constellations on astronomy, and everything else you have to throw away. Like, so it hurts so much, right? It's like these other things are so important too, but you just have to, it's like you have a word limit, you have to fit in that word limit, and it's okay. Like do a really good job explaining one part, and that's much better than trying to condense your entire research paper into 1,000 words, right? So in plain language. So that was a nice lesson for me, just to see, like, you know, it didn't actually make my argument any weaker to not have all this other stuff in there. It made one argument really good. So that's a good thing to keep in mind.
Yeah, it can have a much greater impact when you think about things that you take. I listen to a lot of podcasts, and the ones when I'm then chit-chatting with people about that podcast, I'm generally telling them one thing that I took away from it, right? So, I mean, that's an important thing to think about, what we can each take in at a time. The other point that you made, I think, is really important, and I just want to come back to, is this, you know, you talking to kids about your research. And, you know, that's a really great way for researchers to distill what you're doing into really understandable terms. Is think about telling a school-aged kid, a 12-year-old, what you're doing, the kind of language you need to keep them engaged. And that isn't, I think a lot of researchers I've heard tell me, I don't want to dumb down what I'm doing, but it's not dumbing down. You can talk how, you know, you can use jargon, you can speak on, you know, a different discursive level when you're talking to your peers, but not even everyone who's in the Zoom call is doing the same thing. So in order to understand Sam's research, she has to explain it a certain way. In order to understand, you know, someone else's research, it needs to be explained a certain way. So it's not dumbing down. So what would you say, Sam, to someone that kind of is asking, you know, why is it important? I don't want to dumb down my work. Like, how would you answer that?
Well, I don't know. I feel like a big part, so all of us as researchers are funded by taxpayer money on some level, right? Like, and I feel like this is a way to give back on that, right? Like, what's the point of doing science if people can't find out what you're doing? That's my own personal opinion. So I feel like it is extremely important to tell people what you're doing, and whether that is you yourself going out and telling people, or you talking to a reporter who tells people, or through some other channel. I think it's absolutely vital that we communicate what we're doing to the general public in some way.
Yeah. And I just see a comment about it's not dumbed down, and it's the fact is I've just heard it from researchers who have said that to me, and me saying it's not dumbing down. It really is ensuring that people know what you're talking about. There's
I mean, it's different.
Point.
Yeah, it's different life experiences, right? Like the people you're talking to are, very, very smart in some other area, right? They just don't know your specific words that you're using to talk about something. I rely a lot on analogies for stuff. Like, I don't know, and I come up with really dumb analogies often on the fly. So like,
let's hear one.
Talking,
give me
an
analogy.
So the one that I was really proud of on a radio interview, I don't know, a couple of weeks ago, I was talking about the James Webb Space Telescope that just launched, right? And I was trying to think of like, okay, well, it's a 6.5 meter diameter mirror. What's a good comparison? Oh, grain bin. Talking to Saskatchewan people. It's about the diameter of the bottom of a grain bin. There you go. That's how big the space telescope is, right? So thinking about, the context of who you're talking to and what they would relate to well, right? That's an image that'll probably stick in some people's heads pretty well. So I certainly got a giggle out of it, if nothing else.
I think that's first of all, that's a perfect analogy. I immediately understood. And also a great, really great advice when we can make those kinds of comparisons for people. It really does stick in people's minds. And those are the kinds of things they then are more apt to share. So I'm driving down the highway now with a friend and I see one, I'll be like, hey, did you know? I mean, really these things, that's kind of how these kinds of things get shared too.
Exactly. Yeah. Thank you.
So one last question here, and then we'll get into the Q&A. And you kind of talked about this, and this is just so people kind of get a sense of UAC, but University of Advancement in Communication. But how has our unit assisted you in getting your stories out there? And I know I'm right here, and I don't care what you say. You can say what you want, because this is truth. Let people know what we can do or how we've helped you, if we've helped you.
Oh yeah, for sure. Well, so there was that first initial nudge, right? Like not only did Krista like point out the conversation to me, she kept nudging me to write this, right? And that was exactly what I needed, right? And so that was fantastic. And then more recently, for when I did this big satellite modeling project, Krista and others in her office helped put together a press release, right? And this was a press release with my U of R in Campion, and also University of Toronto and UBC, because that's where my co-authors were, right? So I just said, hey, can we write this press release? And like they did all the work. I don't think I even sent you anything. I think you just like wrote something for me and I proofread it. And then they did all the communicating with other universities, and then they even like filtered reporters to me as those requests came in, right? So it was just like totally cool that got a huge reach that I wouldn't have had otherwise, and it didn't really add much more work for me, so that was fantastic. So I think that was amazing, and I hope that other people can take advantage of that for your science results.
I've read so much of your work, Sam, that I'm going to compete with you to be the second astronomer in the province, and I'm hoping to then overtake your media presence. But just a warning, because I read all your stuff. Just to let other researchers know too, Sam's been in Discourse magazine, so the University of Regina Research magazine. Sam put together a video for kids when the pandemic first started. We helped put together a fun video for Sam that we then released. So, there's lots of different kinds of opportunities depending on your work, depending on what you want to get out there. And as Paul said, the options, there are options, and our team is pretty good at discerning where your work can fit.
Yeah.
So,
Oh, another thing that your office has helped me with is a few times I've gotten just like random media requests from like, and I can, it's really nice to have someone to just sort of bounce things off. Like I said, I have pretty bad imposter syndrome, right? So it's really nice to have someone to bounce things off of, like, is this a scam? Is this actually someone from Singapore who wants to interview me? Really?
and it
right?
was.
Yeah. So that's also really nice to just have that kind of check-in.
Yeah, no, and that's great that we're here for that. I'm also a cheerleader for Sam. So I often let her know she's not often, but I tell Sam she is not an imposter. She is killing it out there and making a really big difference. So Sam, thank you so much for this portion. You can't leave yet because we're gonna now throw out to the audience. But Paul, just want to invite you back in case there's anything that you want to say.
I always have something I want to say.
I knew it. That's why I threw to you, but I didn't want to. Anyway.
And we do have one question in the chat, so we'll go to that right after this. But, you know, on our list of options and vehicles and ways to tell your story, Sam, one thing that we didn't touch on much in our discussion was social media, which brings both, you know, good, mostly good, and a little bit of bad with it. We have also utilized that tool to support you and your work, but I'd like you to talk a bit about your social media presence and how it's contributed to your profile and the profile of your research.
Sure, yeah. I hesitate to say anything good about Twitter because it's such a dumpster fire of humanity most of the time, but it's actually been quite good for me to connect with other astronomers and to talk about things with the general public. So so a lot of sharing these articles that I've written, I've done through Twitter, and it's been, you know, reshared many times. Also connections with reporters, right? There are many reporters who follow me now, and that has been there's one reporter in particular who I follow him and he follows me on Twitter, and he interviewed me about 3 different topics last year, right? It's been fantastic, and just one of them was literally just because I got excited about some new discovery, right? That wasn't even in my area. So and I wrote some things on Twitter being excited about this giant new comet, right? And so that has been actually really good. It's, you know, there's also a lot of downsides, like, you know, just learning how to block people and ignore people and stuff, right? But overall, I'd say that it's been more positive than negative. So, okay. Yeah.
I partly raised it just like there's 2 levels to it, and that's your personal sort of social media profile and how you utilize it and how you use it to talk about your research. And then there's our institutional accounts that can support. So whenever we you know, draft a story or we issue a media release, we do social media support. And I raised it because, you know, just so folks know, it's, you know, we'll put a story up on the homepage and we might get 400 to 600 views on that homepage story. We have a reach on social, like our Facebook followership is around 40,000. Our Twitter followership is around 18,000. So it's just so researchers are aware, sometimes those tools can be more effective in actually getting the messaging and the research stories out. And I'll stop talking now and we'll go to some other questions.
I'm sorry, I only want to say one other thing, and Sam, you touched on this, but you said a reporter reached out to you because you were enthusiastic. I just, you know, I think it comes across how enthusiastic you are about your work. And the last thing I'm going to say until someone actually asks me a question is that comes through in your writing, it comes through in your interviews. And so I think, you know, that's the other message here, which I haven't talked about before, but the enthusiasm is very important for getting your work picked up as well.
Yeah. And that's something, I should just talk about that briefly too, right? Because a lot of our science training is like, oh, you're going to give talks at this conference and use all this jargon and just talk to other scientists, and like, you're not really supposed to get excited about your own work, right? It's supposed to be detached and emotionless, and I think that's silly. because we're all humans and we're doing this research because we really, really care about it. And I feel like just letting that show through that you really care about this, that it's really important to you, I think that makes it so much more interesting for people who are not in your area of research to listen to, right? Especially kids. Like kids will really pick up on it. If you're not super excited, they will just stop listening. So being excited with kids is really helpful, and with the general public. So yeah, good point. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Sam.
Okay.
Okay, Paul, do you want to go to the question? Or?
Thank you, Pam Osmond Johnson, for your patience. We continue chatting, but do you want to turn on your audio and video and ask your question about random media requests?
Yeah, and I guess in some ways it kind of extends a little bit beyond that. I mean, as I'm listening, I'm hearing, in many ways, I feel like we're talking about this notion, concept of the public academic and becoming more of a public figure in the work that we do as academics. And that involves sharing our research, but also moves beyond that to sharing our passions and commentary on social media around what's happening in our field, et cetera. And I guess I have some trepidations around some of these things that I'm just kind of trying to work through in some respects. I have two close friends of mine who are not at the U of R, but are at other institutions in the area of education, who have very high profile Twitter presence. And since the pandemic has come on, like they've actually gone so far as they have to hire students to manage their Twitter account because they're just, I mean, it just blows up. And so we've talked about, the whole do you regret your public academia to the extent that it's become that, because it's almost a full-time job to keep up with the number of posts. And then if they want to take a break from social media, people are messaging them saying, this is happening, why are you not commenting on this? And there's become this expectation that that their voice needs to be a part of every conversation that happens. And of course, in education and other fields during the pandemic, there's lots of conversation. And also related to that, sometimes I struggle with the relationship piece around being a public academic. In education, of course, we have, and other fields as well, there are relationships with field partners that we depend on in order to be able to actually have access to the folks that we want to work with in our research. And so some of the commentary around some of the things that go on, or that, like, I've had a couple of media requests, I've actually turned them down because I felt that I didn't trust, and maybe this is a part of developing more of a relationship that you talked about, Samantha, and kind of having maybe a small core group of people. Like I was hesitant because it seemed that they were trying to get me to talk negatively about a school division or a policy that the government had made. And I will tell you that I actually participated in a public blog forum that was being run leading into the Saskatchewan election a couple of years ago, and it was an initiative called, I believe, like Women in Sask, something to that effect. And there was a number of women from a number of different fields, and it was part of the point was to get women's voices more active in talks around politics and policy. And so I wrote a blog that I don't think was very well received by some of our partner organizations. And I feel that there's been negative backlash in terms of my own personal relationships as a result of that. There's a committee that I was looked over for that probably it was a result of my commentary in that particular way. And so there's some nuancing here around some of this too, in terms of, being able to share some of this work that, when it's critical of what's happening in a particular field. And I've struggled to navigate that. So I guess I'm just wondering if there's any advice or, thoughts around some of that. Yeah.
That was a lot of things, and also you're in a very different area of research than me. But a couple of things I would say is some reporters really like to try to start some kind of argument, right? They really like this narrative of like, oh yeah, like you were saying, they were trying to get you to say something bad about somebody, right? So I had to navigate that a lot with the like Planet 9 research that I've been doing. Like there's one research group that really thinks Planet 9 exists. I think it doesn't exist, right? And reporters really want to like, oh, fight, right? And it's like the guy who's like kind of the main proponent. He was one of my professors in undergrad. I have a lot of respect for him. I just disagree with him, right? So I try to like really carefully say that over and over. Like I think he's a fantastic scientist. This is how science works. We test each other's theories, and sometimes we don't agree with each other, right? We're human. So I try to really bring that up. But then, yeah, like as for, how to decide like what parts of yourself to share. I don't know. It depends on what your goal is. Like a lot of what I share on Twitter is trying to like, look, I'm a human who does science, right? Like, because I think there's a lot of anti-science sentiment in our province, a lot, right? Like, look, I have goats and I have kids and I have, sharing safely that sort of information. I think that's helpful, right? So I think it just sort of depends on what your goal is, right? Like if you want to really make sure that you criticize something in particular, and you're willing to take some risks from that, you could also, try talking to the media team beforehand, right? Maybe they have some suggestions for how you could frame your argument so that it doesn't piss off particular people or something, right? Like, I don't know. So
yeah, it's just that like if you're in a social justice sphere and you're bringing light or shedding, issues around who's involved in decision making and any of those sorts of things, then it isn't necessarily like it's trying to figure out how far do you push. And I think
totally.
In that particular case, I pushed too far. And
yeah. Well, I'm trying to figure out how far do I push against Elon Musk, right? Like that's it gets ugly real fast. So yeah, it's tricky. So that's a tough balance that you have to figure out for yourself. I'm sorry.
I would just add really quickly, Pam, we are here to assist with those kinds of inquiries. I mean, you certainly have a much better handle on who the players are and how those relationships might be impacted if you speak out in a certain way. But we can assist with the media inquiry. Like you're able to set your own parameters, right? We often, on behalf of researchers or administration, as the case may be at the university, will speak to the reporter in advance and ask about the context within which the story is being prepared, and we ask for areas of questioning so we get a sort of a clear, some reporters balk at providing the exact questions they're going to ask, but we are within our rights to ask the areas of questioning, right? Which helps prepare a little bit and provide it might give you a bit more context as to what you're stepping into.
And the other thing is that maybe the reporter question, or maybe that isn't the right route, depending on what it is you want to get out. So perhaps, for example, a Conversation Canada article where you can link to things that provide more context, right? There are other, and that's one of the reasons that we always say, come chat with us, because there's other avenues that might better get that story out or that research out.
Well, in these instances of the media request, they were media seeking, like they were asking for commentary from someone in the faculty, and I was asked by the faculty if I would consider being the person. But to your point, Paul, like there was a lot of conversation on my end around, again, what sorts of questions, is this going to be pre-taped? Is this a live interview? Because that also can be very, you don't know what they're going to actually ask when you're live on the radio or live on TV. And if you don't have that kind of relationship, and also things around like, can I see what you've written in terms of the context? And they were like, no. So I was like, no, that's okay then.
Yeah, that's something they don't,
We're going to move on. Just remind you that next Wednesday, right? We are having a specific session, much like this one, on media engagement alone. So,
thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to just go to Esther's question here. I think that's the next one. Is that right? Yeah. So Esther is asking, actually, Esther, do you want to just ask it? Are you, there you are. Hello.
Sure. Well, I'm just wondering, I guess it's that imposter syndrome again. At what stage do you suggest you start getting your ideas out there and sharing? Like for myself, I'm a PhD student, and I've in the beginning stages of doing research. And so is it too soon? Or is there a certain stage that you recommend you need to be completed your study before you start sharing?
Talk to me whenever you want, and I can help you determine that, first of all, because there could be different parts. So, you know, talk to me whenever. Tell me about your research. Let's have a conversation via Zoom, and I can kind of help determine that. Because yeah, it could be too soon. You could be at an exciting sort of reveal stage. And like I said, just like I mentioned in chit-chatting with Sam, some of these things are multi-step processes. Like sometimes there's some info here, and then sometimes there's something else. You know, maybe there's a part that you're doing right now where I've worked with grad students who are looking for participants in their research. And so that's the very beginning stages. So at that point, that was a great time for that moment to get the research out. So, you know, one of the grad students I worked with was looking at, suicide ideation and needed research participants. Well, that's in the news, that's talked about. We got that, an interview for that specific. So it really depends. And I don't know, Sam, did you have anything you wanted to add to that?
No, I think just if you feel like you have enough to talk about, then do it, right? That's my opinion.
Thanks. That's a really good question, because maybe lots of researchers, you know, have that question who are, you know, postdocs, who are new researchers. And so you know, get in touch and let's chat about it. And the other thing is sometimes researchers, you're really into what you're writing and what you're doing. And there are times that because I used to be a journalist and I understand what I think relatively well, what is interesting and what people want to hear about. Sometimes I'll pick a different thing. Like you'll tell me about your research and be like, isn't that part cool? And be like, yes, but this is more cool. And, you know, so sometimes it's nice just bouncing that off someone who's not in your field, who's not your advisor, who's not your, you know, your colleague, just to say, actually, the grain bin telescope is cool. So anyway.
Okay, thank you so much.
Of course. Thanks for the question. Thanks for coming today.
All right, do we have any other questions for our group or for Sam? All right, then thank you very much for coming. Thank you for your time. Thanks especially to Sam today. Please remember to sign up for next week's session on engaging with the media, where Gordon Pennycook is going to be our next victim or guest, as it may be. We welcome your feedback on this session. Feel free to reach out to myself or Krista if you have thoughts on how this could be improved, what we might have missed, what you want to see covered in future sessions like this one. We will be putting together a package of resources on URSource when we have it together for researchers in terms of telling their stories. We're not quite, we don't have all the pieces ready yet, but we will put that word out to the research list when that time comes. I'm going to turn it over to Andrea here to wrap up, but please, if you have a research story to tell, reach out to Krista, reach out to myself. We'll do the best we can to help. All right, Andrea.
Hi, folks. I just wanted to let you all know that this video will be available on our YouTube channel, and I will share that link via the listserv, the university listserv, once it's up and edited a little bit to put I'll cut out some bits at the beginning and then make it a bit more slick, but it'll be available there. And I hope to see all of you back next week.
Awesome. Thanks everybody for coming out. And Sam, thanks so much. Thanks, Andrea, for hosting. Everyone have an awesome Wednesday.